you have to have that really clear vision on how you think you can impact an industry or a segment, right? The vision is one thing. It's like, we can go tackle this issue. That's great. But then execution of that vision into actually how your product or your service is constructed. That's how it works. That's how fast it works. That's what's priced at. That's how it's priced. The mechanics of how you price a product, the mechanics of the business model are just as important to adoption as.
David, thanks so much for hopping on the podcast today. Excited to speak to you and the work you're doing at Massive Dynamics. I know you're a lifelong entrepreneur yourself, and you help businesses, all the way from, skincare to Gen AI and TPA space to, we were just talking about vegan cheese. So excited to speak to you about your wealth of experience and have you just introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about what you currently do at Massive Dynamics.
Sure, happy to. Pleasure to be here today as well. Appreciate the opportunity to connect and happy to chat through stuff today. So my background is all been in the high-tech startup space. So in the last 35 years, I've done 5 companies that were uniquely either backed by a venture capital firm or backed by private equity. That's kind of the two flavors. And I've been quite fortunate to have good exits along that as well. So, in that trek, you see a lot of things that were done right. And you always strive to kind of replicate those elements in whatever engagement you're doing. And you've seen also things done wrong, probably a lot more wrong than right at the end of the day. But my background my training is actually as an engineer. So I'm an electrical engineer, and I started really in the high tech space on the fabless semiconductor side. So chipset design, low level systems development. This is the days of debugging hardware in a lab on a board with logic analyzers. So a little bit of the hard sciences of silicon out of the box, which I think served as a fantastic fundamental from a technical perspective. Everything we do is built on silicon these days, right?
Right.
More so all the time. And as we look at the AI race in particular, that's, the growth engine for both capacity, capability, and then execution of services and product as well, obviously, right?
Yeah, right on. And with this interesting background you have with the engineering space and the hard science of silicon, like you called it, what led you to start Massive Dynamics, where you're currently focused on? So,
very fair question. The reality is that the reason I started the company about 10 years ago is because my wife of 25 years at the time sat me down and said, how many more times are we going to take all our previous winnings from the last company we sold and put them at risk in the next company? That's a pretty fair question. And so it was partly a kind of a third of life thing where there's changes that you make as your career goes on, and you're always looking to optimize the value of your time and the kind of things that you want to work on. And I realized that I really enjoyed the variety of working on more than one project at a time, right? I mean, the startup slog is just that. It's like you're hyper-focused to solve a set of problems that are specific to one venture. You're poured in just completely, 100% on that until you get to an exit point, right? And it has obviously got a lot of challenges. It demands a lot of you and whatnot. I realized maybe about 10 years ago, I really liked the variety of different things. And so when I formed Massive Dynamics, it was partially to address my wife's concerns. It was also partially because I really enjoy the dynamic nature of working on and learning different businesses in different industries. But we have, myself and the other folks on the team here, we all had a very strong sense that there was a lot that we could contribute to companies of kind of any shape and size that were trying to go through high growth moments in their business. And, we were excited to kind of, put our shoulder to the wheel and help them in any way we could, right?
Right. Yeah, right on. No, I love it. The story with how many more times are we going to put winnings from one company into the next? I love that.
She was very specific about that question.
That's a very specific question. Yeah. And, David, you through all these businesses you've worked with a lot of founders and CEOs, right? And I think you and I have related on this note of they're really good at building technology. They're systems people. They're good at what they deliver in their product. But oftentimes, companies will struggle with scaling after early traction. And then you add to the fact that they get pressures from VCs and PEs, right, to deliver on targets. What patterns have you seen across the companies that you work with, including in high tech and healthcare on that regard?
We always see the challenges as for founders who come in with a really strong sense of a product or service, and usually it's combined with some pretty good domain knowledge, like they're expert in an area because they've seen the issues and there's a hole that's
Right.
kind of been identified that needs to be filled, right? And that's actually the perfect start for a new company potentially. But those people are often not necessarily the ones who end up running the company long term. And they will frequently get to a spot where they're like, hey, I've done all these things and this is all going great, but I've got this stuff over here that doesn't work right.
Right.
That's kind of a good example of one of our inflection points from a consulting perspective is we bolt the work that we do and the team members that we have onto projects like that to give people not just bandwidth and horsepower, but also domain expertise in areas where it's like they don't have to be excellent at that today. As long as it gets done and the ball doesn't get dropped, right? And that's allowed us to, I think, make some really significant contributions to early stage companies without having to sacrifice, equity or much equity, and, preserves their ability to do the most important thing, which is move fast, right? So you're up against two things in every startup company. You've got capital constraints and you've got time constraints. And neither one of them are truly renewable, right? They both kind of run out or they have to be managed carefully. So anything that we do working with like an early stage client, especially that preserves either component or both of those components is typically of really high value.
Right on. That's powerful. Capital constraints and time constraints both aren't truly renewable,
They're not really, I mean, you can always raise more capital, but at what cost, right?
Yeah. And
you can't always raise more capital. You always think you can, or you always want to be able to, but sometimes you can't do that either, right?
Right. Because of the time constraint, Yeah.
And industry too, I mean, not industry, but like global, economic trends as well. I mean, if you go back to 2009 is a good example. There were so many actually really high quality companies that either suffered and saw big losses of market share or personnel or failed because of the overall recession that we were in 2009 that was deep enough that, especially in the VC world, I think, firms with portfolio companies, they held capital. They didn't deploy new funds necessarily because they wanted to preserve capital for their existing portfolio, right? Because you don't know when things are going to improve. And the reality is they had to keep those companies alive. So companies that were planning in 2008 and 2009 specifically, companies that were planning to like raise their A round is a good example. There's very little funding that was delivered at that time frame because of those reasons I mentioned.
Right. Yeah.
Compared to previous years, right?
Right. And you've seen like the whole gamut now, or flavors, as you called it earlier, of capital constraints, time constraints, VC, PE pressures. How do you guys approach things differently at Massive Dynamics? Like a few things stood out to me from like your website and what we've talked about, like sales acceleration, strategic execution, even emerging areas, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, like Gen AI. Like, How are you guys approaching this like engagements differently, knowing you have your wealth of experience and background in this area?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way around it. We view all of our client engagements from the perspective of an entrepreneur. So and everyone here in the team has built multiple businesses, right? So when we step in and we start working with a client and we see the challenges they've got in front of them, which by the way are often not the ones that the client thinks are the big challenges. Sometimes they're like, I have this problem with sales. And you're like, no, I actually have a problem with product market fit, right?
Yeah.
We come in and we look at it as if it was our company. And when we make a recommendation or make a suggested direction, it's quite frankly because that's what we would do if it was our business. And so we're allergic. I mentioned time, mentioned capital. It's going to be kind of a thread of steel through everything that we do. But we're allergic to wasting either of those things. If we can find a way to pull risk forward, if we can find a way to get, build a better understanding on like market analysis or market penetration or, like assessing value proposition, the faster we can pull that data forward and get a better understanding of whether or not that's aligned properly, the better off that company is always going to be, right? So it's that old smash your product or your service against the marketplace and see what's going to happen, right? But the tools we use to do that, I think, are what differentiates us to some extent from other firms out there. There's certainly a lot of large firms that are looking for, 6+ figure engagements every single time they pull out a contract. And that's not necessarily what a company needs, right? A
Right.
lot of times they need a little engagement with a small project that gets some insights that are really going to clarify what the next year for them is going to look like. So there's no one size fits all.
I got you. Yeah. And I like what you said about like thinking of it as it's our business, like you really approach it from the lens of an entrepreneur because you are an entrepreneur. You've done it with so many businesses. And what about like something I've seen with a lot of, especially companies in the health tech space is everyone is developing like AI these days, like
Absolutely.
everyone is putting
and rightly so.
Yeah.
Yeah, rightly so. So we do, obviously, for real reasons, we do a lot of work with more and more work these days with companies in the AI space. And then in healthcare and in health tech in general, there's no lack of problems to point at, whether it's, the diagnostic side, whether it's the charting side, whether it's the administrative waste side. There's so many things that come at. And the great thing about where we are today with the current state of AI is that a lot of the stuff that we tried to solve, these companies tried to solve 10 years ago with machine learning and early AI, you just couldn't solve some of these big challenges. Like administrative paperwork side is a good example, right? So there are just too many corner cases where if you're trying to build a software solution to address some of these big waste issues, you can't manage every corner case that you're going to hit, right? But now with the state of, almost all the major LLMs now, you're able to parse a lot of the complexities that you just couldn't before, right? And so that's giving a lot of companies, actual deliverable services and products that have a much, much better chance of delivering on the promise.
Yeah. Interesting. And you, given your like engineering background, have you gotten to the point where you're helping clients like place engineers in their business to build these AI solutions, or is it more the advisory of like, hey, this is your kind of like your product roadmap you want to get after with AI?
Yeah, good question. So yes, absolutely. So we have a very strong technical arm in the business. We have on many occasions placed heads of engineering, but also CTO level people as well. And they, for us, those are usually fractional appointments where we're filling a hole that they know they have to fill themselves at some point. But if we can go in and basically keep the company moving, make sure the company's delivering, on product every 2 weeks, practicing the best practices and in methodologies in software development, if that's the case, right? Keep them on track with those things and let the organization grow. We can then kind of step out and other people can step in on a more full-time basis. In some cases, we've been with companies for years in that situation, but dropping in a lot of value out of the box where I think, by their own admission, if they kind of just use their own dev team or use their own founders to kind of make these things work, they would not be as successful as quickly, right? So there's a company on the East Coast that we started working with last May. I mean, they had $500 to their name when we started talking to them. And we put the entire belt and suspenders around that business for them in the healthcare space. They've been working on the product for 7 months. They had nothing that they could deliver. They had nothing they could show. And literally within 6 weeks of our team coming in and taking over the engineering side and taking over the roadmap and some of the kind of technical architecture as well, 6 weeks later, boom, they dropped their first release. It was functional. Clients had it in their hand. They were testing it, getting feedback on it right away.
Yeah, that's a powerful story of like literally coming in and helping them deliver value. 6 weeks of something that we're working on for 7 months. I know we mentioned Gen AI. I'm just curious for the viewers, like what are those applications of Gen AI versus like your traditional AI, right? Like, because there's all this talk about AI in the market. Like, where do you actually have you seen like success stories with generative AI?
I mean, I think most people are tackling similar kinds of issues, which is usually around massive data sets and a lot of, very large and very high, high demanding processing of information and calculations, right? I mean, I know it's very generic to say that, but I mean, if we look at some of the companies that are working on the diagnostic side, for example, I think we've already seen AI delivering a lot of what was talked about 10 years ago that really didn't come to fruition. Now we're seeing companies that are able to much more effectively deliver on the diagnostic and like image pattern recognition diagnosis side, which is, got a lot of value that stretches, I think, very quickly into specialties, right? So I think medical specialties were an area that was, for a long time, people thought, well, that's the last place that AI is going to help us because there's so much specificity required in these areas to really know what you're doing.
Right.
But the reality is some of these tools are extremely helpful on those areas because they're narrower in focus, right? At the very least, we're seeing very cool tools right now that people are rolling out that are helping specialists do their job better and more quickly. So yeah, I can't go into some specifics because it's not confidential, but yeah, there's some really cool stuff happening there right now.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. That reminds me, I had a conversation with one of my good friends the other day who's a neurosurgeon resident, and he just asking, hey, like, I know AI is coming in my field. Like, I don't know yet what the solutions are that I need to use, but 5 years from now, him as a practicing neurosurgeon will have these at his disposition, for imaging, for, many parts of his specialty in his practice. So really interesting. Now, I know we talked about like sort of the constraints that you've seen with businesses, like how you guys approach it differently and help them. Like what tends to hold back, businesses from achieving like real scalable growth, and how do you help them get past that? Because I love the example of the East Coast company, but what really holds them back and how do you help them get past
there's a lot of other things that was holding that company back too, including the founder and some of the challenges in leadership that individual had, significant ones that made it very difficult for him to build a cohesive team, right?
Yeah.
Just lack of experience, lack of capability in that space. But, the answer there is with someone like that, you augment them with higher quality people around them. And you build in capacity in areas or disciplines in areas where there aren't any. And then you can grab the vision that founder set us, identified and run with it, right, successfully.
Right.
But it's always a really, really big challenge is developing and building those teams out successfully. As far as the issues that are holding people back, I feel like every entrepreneur points to capital as their big constraint. But the reality is that getting access to capital is really about clearly stating a powerful and efficient for where the company is going that you attract that capital, right? So the old adage, good companies get funded. It's still true, right? It's largely true, but sometimes the companies they struggle to clearly convey their opportunity in a way that an investor understands. And this has always been a challenge, certainly a challenge in AI. I think that, AI, we're at the stage now, in my opinion, we're at the stage now where AI is a net negative in the fundraising effort. Because if you say, hey, we're a generative AI company, everyone who's raising capital says that, and then you almost get kind of a look of disbelief. Like, okay, well, let's find out why this isn't really the case. Like, what did you paste on to your other product to make it a generative AI product, right? And so now it's almost like a hurdle where you have to say, yes, we're generative AI, but we're actually doing this the right way. And so you kind of need to lead with why that solution is truly innovative now.
Yeah.
Right? Why this wasn't fixable like 3 or 4 years ago, for example.
Yeah, all these VCs and PEs know that companies are developing AI, but like you said, what are you using it for, and are you doing it the right way? Like now, it's going to become like who can use it at it's a race to who can demonstrate that vision and who can like use it effectively.
And honestly, the big issue that we see in the healthcare space, the verticalized companies that are very non-technical. This is especially true in the TPA space. That entire industry is full of companies that are literally working pen and paper to pass documents, to make changes, to keep records, and those same companies. I mean, it's like a circa 1970s kind of working environment in some cases. I mean, we had a client the other day who said, "Oh yeah, this is great. I love the fact that we can that your new fancy tool exports, but can you make sure that it exports into WordPerfect because we use WordPerfect? And our tech team looked around. We were like, is WordPerfect a supported software product today?
Yeah.
It is, by the way, in case you want to go back to WordPerfect,
Okay.
it's there.
Yeah.
But, so for them, the challenge is adoption, right? So, check the box and say, hey, there's a product that does deliver value. Now you've got to get, thousands or hundreds of thousands of users to adopt it and utilize it now. Mm-hmm. And so, it's like this is a case where the CEO will look at a new product that solves a potentially significant issue in their industry. They might not even know how unproductive and how backwards his own, his departments might be, and how much this is needed, right? So you're actually doing a lot of education at the executive level. And then when you get adoption at the executive level, you got to go into the working level and say, hey guys, I know we've been using red pens and we've been printing things out and walking around with this paper, but we're going to do this instead, right? And that adoption is a whole different challenge in of itself. And what we see time and time again is companies underestimating the time it takes to get people to move and to migrate and adopt.
Yeah, I think the hardest part of any large scale transformation is change, and like getting on board that change. And it's this notion that you might relate to of by you helping these companies clearly state their vision and helping them, deploy that capital. It's like you're helping them avoid this dumb tax, right? Like so that they don't make the same dumb mistakes that other companies did, right? Like that's what it comes down.
Yeah, we joke about that all the time. Like we pay the dumb tax in all of our other businesses, so like you don't have to pay yours now.
Right.
If you listen.
Which is
we try.
Yeah. That's a vastly underrated, I think, skill is learning from other mistakes so that you don't make them, like I think this accelerates your learning curve. And I don't think people do it enough, or companies don't do it enough,
No, and this is actually where companies can get, especially early stage companies, get a huge amount of value out of a consulting group like ours that comes in and has done this stuff before. But it always comes down to the personalities of the people who've hired us and how much they're capable of accepting and adopting suggestions without having gone through their own experience, right? And a classic example of this is like equity and compensation management or early stage companies, especially when you're pre-revenue and you've maybe raised a seed round or something, and there's a little bit of money to give your development team, and there's a little bit of money maybe that some of the people can put in their pocket, right? And we see companies all the time get absolutely high-centered on like how much equity they're giving up, what their comp structure is, how far they go for any perfect person who's like, we have to have this guy. He's got to come on board. He's critical to, what we're doing. And, and that person is just making the negotiation very difficult. And, from their perspective, it's a do or die thing to get this one person on board, for example, or to make sure you meet their expectations on equity compensation or something. And the reality is it's just not that important usually. And the industry, there's industry standards out there because that's what typically works. And, you can fight these things. You can try to invent a new way through, but you're going to just waste a ton of time and energy and effort when you really should go out and build your product or deploy it.
Right. Yeah. And you guys opened up those doors, access to different, other channel talent sources through other channels, right? Like
totally. Yeah. I mean, we can walk in and basically say, on a whiteboard or basically just drop a doc and say, this is your standard comp structure. This is, you're going to be plus or minus 15% in any industry in the high tech space if you do it this way. And, you're not going to have an investor go, what the hell did you just do here? Why'd you give the farm away for these folks? Right.
Yeah.
And that's just going to be like, check the box, move forward, like go to the next thing, tackle the next most important thing. Because the focus pieces, and this goes back to the dumb tax, right? The focus piece is just critical. We see such diffused focus sometimes. And the reality is those companies are the ones that don't make it because they can't get out of their own way.
Right. On that point of diffused focus, like for another like tangible example for the viewers, like, because something I've seen a reflection and a question is, you can tell just like speaking to certain founders and CEOs, like the ones that have put a lot of time and intention behind the vision of the company and their goals.
Yep.
Like you can see it in the form of a deck and slides,
Hmm.
that clearly articulate, hey, here's our vision, here's our business model, here, that sort of thing. Is that
Yep.
something, you and your team come in and help, founders and CEOs with as well, to like get that story
Absolutely.
in place?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the whether it's an investor deck or a sales deck, right? When you're taking your first products out, they have to convey a huge amount of confidence and a huge amount of opportunity. Like, adopt this or you're on the losing end,
Right.
right? Like people want to feel, and even your buyers, they want to feel like they're doing this because this is what's going to pull them forward into success or pull them forward to the next opportunity. That if they don't do this, they're going to miss out, right? And that miss out piece, boy, that is that is
Yeah.
a special kind of that is a special sauce on any pitch that takes time to refine,
Yes.
right? Because you try 1,000 little things, and you think this is the way I would say this, or this is the way I'm going to help the audience understand this, and it doesn't quite resonate. And the reality is, you want to build the best initial kind of pitch strategy you can, but you have to go out and just pitch it,
Yeah.
dozens and dozens or thousands of times, right? And be willing to refine it, keep refining it, right?
Keep refining it, yeah, as you learn from your target market and speaking to your target buyers, right? But yeah, you're going to miss out piece is huge. Like there's a psychological piece to that is not spoken about enough, where humans buy or invest when they feel like they are missing out on something. There's a pain, an opportunity, a gap, and you
Yeah.
have to hit on that, right? Like you said, it's not enough to just say, hey, we are developing AI. We're a Gen AI company. Okay, but what is it doing? Are you doing it the right way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to have the really clear vision on kind of what you think, how you think you can impact an industry or a segment, right? But the sooner, you have to have an incredibly clean, very direct, very genuine relationship with the client, so that you can quickly test a lot of your assumptions on how you're building your product or delivering your service, right? And if you don't have a good, clean, genuine, and I say genuine because it's like, you don't want someone who's just, inflating your ego because they're your buddy or your friend. You need clients on the other side who are really critical and have real problems, and they desire a solution, right? Because
Right.
they're going to tell you, in the best relationships there, they will tell you how to build your product,
Right.
right? And the thing is, the vision is one thing. It's like, we can go tackle this issue. That's great. But then execution of that vision into actually how your product or your service is constructed, like, that's how it works, that's how fast it works, that's what's priced at, that's how it's priced, right? The mechanics of how you price a product, right? Is it on a, every time you turn the crank? Is it every time it lifts a certain, issue this far? Is it when you reach this kind of success? Is it, the mechanics of the business model are just as important to adoption as the actual functional product is. Like, if you go and try to sell a product with the wrong business model, people don't understand it, they can't adopt it. Like, industries will just reject it out of hand. That makes sense?
It makes sense. No, yeah, I think that's a quote in its own. The mechanics of the business model and pricing just as important as the product. It's so true, right?
It is, and it directly impacts the speed you're going to get adoption, right? And sometimes little changes make a huge difference. Like a little 8-degree rotation on a business pricing structure or a business model can radically change the way people see and adopt, and how quickly they adopt it as a result, right? Because it goes to, are you charging for something that they find, the chargeable event, do they find it valuable? Because if they don't, they're not going to want to get charged for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many examples of that, because commonly at least on the health tech side, speaking from that, and there's a lot of annual SaaS based deals, right? So like, what is the value of getting charged annually for what I'm adopting? Is that like, that's the thing, because that's the goal. That's kind of like the North Star for a lot of companies, is they want to get to an annual SaaS model that have a software platform, but is that the
Yeah,
model?
and the TPA space is a good example, because you've got a lot of players touching similar production pieces. Like, think about like the claims side of things, where you've got insurance brokers, you've got employers, you've got third-party administrators, you've got insurers. and you've got other TPAs in the space that may be doing like payment processing or collection or adjudication or whatever those things are, right? Every one of those persons in that ecosystem has a different thing that's important to them, right? Like the insurance broker, the most important thing to the insurance broker often, especially when it comes to renewal time, is their ability to really quickly create accurate and correct and compelling offers,
Yeah.
right? So, and they want to be able to create a lot of custom like benefits packages because they're trying to meet a specific client's needs in a certain area. It's like, they have a certain set of benefit features that they know they want to offer their employees, for example, right? So they have to create these things. And for them, it's almost like pre-printing money because the more they can send these out, the better chance they're going to get policy signed and they're going to earn their commissions on that, right?
Right.
So for them, they have a certain document that's important to them, but they may be the only one who cares about that document, right? So, and the other people who are in your ecosystem or your clients as well, they may not put a value on that particular item, or speed may not be the most important thing. It may be, is this legally, factually correct? Can I defend this if I had to defend this in court, right? If I got sued, for example. And so there's another influence on it affects the same document potentially, right? Yeah. So these are really critical things to understand.
Yeah, right on. No, it's amazing the breadth and depth of experience and knowledge you have in this space with businesses of all sizes and different industries. So on that point, for founders or business leaders listening to this and thinking this is the type of partner we need, like David and his team at Massive Dynamics, how can they connect with you guys online?
Certainly just hit us on the website, which is massivedynamicslabs.com. You can always find me directly at just davidfoos.com as well. Those will basically lead you both into us. And we're always happy to, talk to companies of any shape and size to understand, hey, what are the challenges that you're facing? What are the things you feel like maybe you tried and you couldn't break through on it, or you tried and failed? We have a lot of clients, especially overseas, who are large companies, like billion-dollar companies in some cases, who have tried to bring products into the U.S. and failed, for example, and really struggle with localization, execution, planning, and strategy. We've got so many great case studies of companies that we've really seen them achieve unbelievable things by just working together on some projects and really helping them through these things. A lot of these things are all fixable. And if they're not, we'll be the first one to tell you, this is something we don't know if this is fixable for you or not, right? There's a bigger issue here at play, which sometimes that's the case, which is terrifying to say, but you want to know that sooner than later, I think, right?
Right. Absolutely. And it sounds like overall the U.S. healthcare market, not just healthcare, but the U.S. market at large is an area that you definitely specialize in, based on everything.
We do. I mean, about half our clients are overseas today, and I would say about 20% of our clients are pre-revenue, so early stage companies. So we do have some very light, simple programs that are valuable for early stage companies in like the advisory area and stuff. Those often start as an advisory engagement, and then they grow into a fractional executive engagement because they've grown, they have more success, and they need more help. And we're there for the ride. We're there to help them out, right? Our desire is always to kind of be like water with our clients. We don't have an ego in this. We're going to be very direct and genuine about our recommendations and how we would suggest approaching things. At the end of the day, we want our clients to be successful because that's at the end how we have long-term engagements as well, right? Yeah. So our average engagement with a client right now is a little over 3 years. Not because that's by design. We don't force people to do that, right? A lot of our engagements are monthly, right? If we're not driving value for a client, we want to part ways right away, right? Yeah. And we're also, in all fairness, we're pretty picky about our clients too, because if we don't have confidence that we can really help somebody and move the needle in the area that's important to them, we're going to say, hey, we're not the guys to help you out, right? Yeah. But the flip side of that is that all of our clients love us, and that's fantastic. That's where we want to be as a business. Yeah. So.
That's an impressive LTV 3 years, and it's a testament to all the dumb tax you've paid along the way so that your clients don't pay, Yeah. But David, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think just as we were talking, a lot of fellow business leaders, founders I've spoken to come to mind, that could this could help. So I appreciate you taking the time and enjoy our
Absolutely.
chat today.
Happy to. We're always happy to jump on a quick Zoom call, have a chat with, meet a new business, understand what their challenges are. If we can help out, we'll certainly, we'll certainly try. So.
And you're based out west, but always traveling. Is that right? You're based in
Yeah, we're headquartered in San Diego.
Yeah.
The team is throughout North America, and we have some folks internationally as well. So depending where you're at, we probably have somebody pretty close to you. But geography is just that, it's geography. It's not.
Yeah.
There's no more borders anymore, right? We all are where we need to be at the end of the day. So we do travel quite a bit.
Right on.
For face-to-face time. So.
All right. Well, there you have it. David, pleasure. Thank you for hopping on, and we'll definitely be in touch. And best of luck.
Sounds great. Thanks, Bert. Appreciate it. Pleasure to talk today.
Thanks, David.